Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a really cool knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. One that I've wanted to check out for myself for a very long time and have almost bought for myself many times. This is the Reate new Epoch. Wonderful, wonderful knife. I've got a lot to say about it. Thank you so much to Mr. Anonymous who sent this and many other knives for review. He also sent me a bunch of gifts. That was really, really nice. But like I said, he wishes to remain anonymous, and I'm going to honor that. So thank you very much. And also, of course, thank you to my generous patrons who are supporting me right now. If you'd like to check out my Patreon and get your hands on some of these cool stickers, there is, of course, a link down in the description. The support would mean the world to me. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this guy. This is a full-size knife coming in at 8 1/4 inches overall. Blade length coming in at 3. Boy, it's more than I thought. 3.6, and then cutting edge coming in just a little bit over. Yeah, it's about 3.6. Pretty great ratios there. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1 is coming in at 8.6 inches overall, so it's a little bit longer there. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? Spyderco PM2 coming in at 8.3 inches overall. Let me get this right. The Reate Epoch is looking, it's just the angle, it's just the way that it's sitting there. Yeah, it's 8 1/4. So the Spyderco PM2 actually looks shorter, but it's because of the slight angle of the camera. I can assure you guys the PM2 is just a little bit longer. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue is coming in at 8 inches overall, so a little bit shorter than the Epoch. And last but not least, the Spyderco Para 3. Para 3 is coming in at 7 1/4 inches overall. So how's the action on this guy? Mr. Anonymous told me that this was basically a guillotine, and he is not incorrect at all. The action is absolutely 100% fall shut. This is, I mean, Reate knives do smooth knives, right? But this is smooth even for a Reate. This is crazy. The downside to this, I mean, on the upside, yeah, it's really cool. I mean, that type of action, the frictionless fall shut action that is very similar to what I experienced with Shirogorov knives, that's really, really cool to experience. And it's, you know, it makes you feel good about the money that you've spent, which, by the way, this is a fairly expensive knife. Not crazy. It's actually, honestly, pretty good. And you can find it down in the description. I'll make sure and link it. But it always makes you feel good about spending extra money, right? But the downside is that you really need to make sure that you familiarize yourself with this knife and be ready for it, because we're at an angle here, which means I'm not holding the knife straight up and down, and it is very easily wanting to fall. So if your fingers aren't out of the way, that very sharp blade can come down on your fingers, so just beware of that. The action is incredible, though. The detent is tuned perfectly, feels good. There's no rough landing zone. The flipper tab is designed, I mean, like, it's shaped in a way that's just made for a finger, which sounds crazy, but it's funny how many knife makers and manufacturers don't get that right, or it's just uncomfortable. Really great. On top of that, guys, this looks and feels very similar to a no-choil XM18, which is part of the reason why I personally lusted after this for a long time. Years ago on the forums, I had an opportunity to trade a Gen 4 for a Reate Epoch, and I didn't do it. And I think if I could go back in time now and do that, I probably would. This is an amazing, amazing knife. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check on this guy. Get out my handy-dandy Wiha bit selector and Wiha magnetic stubby driver, two items that are extremely inexpensive and extremely recommendable. You can find them down in the Amazon store that I reference at the beginning of every single video. Just open up the store and look for knife maintenance. I'm going to guess that that pivot is a T10. That's what it looks like there. I'm going to just carefully, yeah, T10, T10. And then much to my whatever word I'm looking for there. Insert whatever word to say it makes me happy. The body screws are T8, which is just great. I mean, pocket clip, lock bar stabilizer, it's all T8. Thank you, Reate. That is fantastic. I am a big fan of any fastener size that is above T6 and T7. I know I don't usually see T7, but T8 and up, really happy with that. that's great. No issues there whatsoever. Let's talk about carry profile. Real quick, let's measure the blade stock thickness. I always kind of forget to do that right off the bat. I'm going to guess this is about 150 thousandths. 157. Okay, so it's between 155 and 160, which is pretty typical of Reate. So similar to this feels very Hinderer sized, very ZT sized. I mean, that's the kind of, build that we're looking at here. It's robust. It's not massively XL, but it is certainly not a small size. This is a full size, hard use titanium frame lock. Absolutely. So in terms of thickness, up against the Spyderco Para 3, you can see here that we are a little thicker. There's some contouring going on or some very heavy chamfering, right? But yeah, it's fairly thick. It's not monstrously thick. It's not Medford thick, but it is a thick knife. The profile is pretty good though. And even though it does have a flipper tab, it's really not all that tall. So up against the Spyderco Para 3 and PM2, two knives that have awkward carry profiles that nobody ever complains about. You can see there, in terms of handle length, we're still shorter than the PM2. And in terms of height, even with the flipper tab, we're shorter this way than either of these knives. So it's like I usually say, if you're carrying nothing else in your knife pocket except for your knife, this isn't going to bother you. But it is a fairly thick object, and it's definitely a big knife with a flipper tab. So, if you're wearing jeans, right, normal outdoor work pants is not going to bother you. If you're wearing skinny jeans, if you're wearing athletic shorts, things like that, it's probably going to bother you. Let's talk about weight. Whoops. I'm going to zero it out. Sorry about that. Let's look on the inside here because this is full titanium, but it is nicely milled out. And that the end result of that is that this comes in a little lighter than some people might expect at about 5.47 ounces. If you're wondering, the Hinderer XM18, again, same blade length, same overall length, right, and about the same thickness. The full-tie XM18s that I generally carry are usually about 6.25 ounces. Even with a milled out scale, I've heard that the overall weight of those knives comes in at about 5.6 or so, so it's still lighter than that. Anybody who's been used to carrying this size of knife, you're not going to be bothered by that. But if you're used to carrying the Para 3 lightweight or the bug out or mini bug out, yeah, this probably isn't going to be for you. And of course, if you can't carry a blade that's over 3 inches or over 3.5 inches, then this also isn't going to be for you. But for the most part, this is right there where I like to carry. I like a full-size knife. I like a full titanium knife, right? And I like a little bit of heft. I like knowing that it's there in my pocket. I like being reminded that it's there, right? I like a little bit of density, and it feels good, right? It's in hand. The excess, the little bit of excess heft makes me feel good, makes me feel prepared, I guess. And that's not necessarily something that you can measure and say has any specific utilitarian benefit, but I think a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. This knife feels great in hand. Did we cover all of that? I think that we did. So this knife has a bunch of different forms. And like I said, I'll link them all down in the description. But the cool thing about this knife is that it comes with this little strip, and it's actually laid into the titanium. This is Timascus. Timascus is always something that if you find it on, part of the knife, even if it's just a small inlay, usually adds to the value, like crazy. It's not uncommon to find, aftermarket Timascus clips, around the $100 mark. If you guys have ever seen a knife where the entire titanium frame is made out of Timascus, those always command massively high prices. Timascus doesn't do anything except look nice, and it does. It looks really nice. It's folded and then anodized titanium, and they have laid it into the frame absolutely flawlessly. Anybody wondering or worried about whether or not that Timascus was laid in correctly, fear not. It is perfect. And I've heard this on blade forums from other people who own this knife. There seems to be no variation there. It's always done really, really well. The rest of the knife is titanium, and then we've got CTS 204P. You can see that this is also numbered out of 400. There are a few variants of this that are already sold out. If you're wanting to get your hands on this, then yeah, they do these in short runs. Now, I remember the first time I saw the Epoch, and I can't remember if it was called the new Epoch or the Epoch. And so this is where it gets confusing, because if you look at Riate's line and you look at, like, for example, the Torrent, there's the Torrent and then there's the new Torrent, I think, and that's confusing. There's also like the Horizon A, B, C, and D. I don't understand that. As far as whether or not this is a new run of 400 and what it means for the future of the Epoch design, I don't know, right? But looking at Riate's past, it's pretty similar to what we see in a lot of knife manufacturers. They've got a certain model that's available for a certain amount of time, and then, you know, they either bring it back or they discontinue it and they move on, right? As far as this one goes, this particular one that's available right now at this date, it is number 72 of 400, and there are some left. I've seen all black ones. I've seen satin finished ones. I've seen all tumbled like this, which is exactly what I would do. And the tumbling that's on this is very dark and sort of concrete-esque. It's nice. It's going to hide wear over time, or it's going to help build character over time as you use it, and that's great. Let's take a look here at the handle scales. There's a lot of chamfering going on, and it's really nice. There's a lot of rounding, everything. I mean, there's nothing sharp here at all, except for obviously the cutting edge. But flipper tab's been knocked down. The jimping that's on there is very non-aggressive, so even in a situation where you're working and really bearing down on the knife, it's not going to cut into your hand. In fact, ergonomics on this thing are just perfection. It's just wonderful. The pocket clip is not a hot spot. The handle scales have that heavy chamfering, so there's a lot there, but it all goes right into just filling out your hand. It's nice, it's comfortable, and there's a lot of room on the handle, so you're kind of free to move around a little bit, right? If you've got massive XL hands, you're still going to be able to get probably a full 4-finger grip on this knife. And if you've got smaller hands, you've just got more room to move around. And that's excellent. I love that. I don't like being confined to certain spaces on the knife, especially if it's a larger knife, right? I want that excess to give me the option to move around while I'm using this, right? This is a knife, you know, people say, oh, it's on bearings, it's not hard. Yes, this knife is absolutely made to be used outside, right? The build absolutely suggests that. We'll talk about a bunch of different elements here in a second, but yeah, this knife feels really great in hand, and whether I'm wearing gloves or just barehanded, I'm going to be happy with that. So that's great. The hardware also looks nice all the way around. It's very simple, but it's set into the frame nicely. Like I said, T8 everywhere, so that's great. No issues there whatsoever. The blade is a simple spear point or drop point blade. It says Riyadh on the front, and then on the other side it says CTS 204P, and then the number. Right? There's nothing crazy going on here, no crazy billboarding. We have a flat that carries out about 70% the length of the blade, carries a nice amount of thickness out to the tip. This blade is absolutely durable, ready to go. The edge does not come down to an absolute laser beam, but it is impressively thin for, you know, what this knife is. This is a super versatile blade shape, right? The common drop point / spear point, right? Depending on where the flat is, whatever. It's very, very sort of typical drop point blade. But it's ground really, really well. And I think the 204P is being emphasized or being, the blade shape is one that properly emphasizes 204P in this build. This blade could have come in a number of different steels and it would have been just fine. 204P being Carpenter's version of CPM 20CV or, let's see, I'm sorry. 204P is Carpenter's version of 20CV or M390 essentially. So that makeup is one that is still incredibly popular. In fact, it's probably still the most popular blade steel, and I think it's just fine here. It doesn't have a lot of toughness, but it certainly has an enormous amount of edge retention and corrosion resistance, and that's kind of what people like to see in this price range anyway. This wedge looks great. Lots of rounding up here, no sharp edges or anything like that. The final cutting edge is perfectly even on both sides, so no wonkiness there, anything like that. This appears to be brand new and has that nice glassy smooth edge that we look for and a nice tip there. So yeah, I mean, this thing is set up and ready to cut. You're not going to have any issues with that, and there's also nothing in the cutting path. And unlike a Hinder XM18 or a standard one, there is no big forward choil. It's just a little sharpening choil that I think is done really, really well. And that means that there's nothing in the cutting path at all. It's ready to cut. No issues there. The blade is essentially perfect. There's plenty of room to engage the lock bar from this position, the nice cutout there. So it makes it really comfortable to engage and disengage. There is no double clutch. It basically, I mean, it's much like, you know, all the other perfectly designed titanium flippers out there, titanium frame lock flippers. What we want is to be able to pull the knife from the pocket, comfortably and conveniently deploy the knife, disengage the lock bar, push down on the spine, have the flipper tab meet your thumb while the detent ball is already up on the face of the blade, and then you want to be able to either turn it and let it fall shut or just kick the blade down into the closed position like this. And they did that perfectly. There's nothing to complain about there. It's absolutely perfect. I like titanium backspacers with the gear pattern, and they did this wonderfully. A lot of times I say, you know, I like to just see 2 screws, It's not a deal breaker if it's 3 screws. It's just more hardware. It's not that big of a deal at all, but that's what they went for here. We've got a backspacer that is, I think, probably about 50% of the overall body, and there's lots of sort of gear pattern texturing here, and that's nice. It's not aggressive, but I guess if you're going to hold the knife upside down, it'll provide a little bit of excess traction down here too, but it's not aggressive, and it looks nice. I like how this looks. Not everybody likes how this looks, but I think this is great. It's got a nice unobtrusive area for the lanyard, right? If you're a lanyard person, it's there. If you're not a lanyard person, whatever, it's not going to bother you. The pocket clip looks great, and it goes with the design, and it does have this ceramic ball, which in some designs I don't like. It feels a little pinchy. It makes it a little difficult to get in and out of the pocket. This is fine. The denser the pocket, the more difficult it is for that little ball to pass over the material. But for the most part, it's fine. In worst case scenario, you just do that thing where you sort of, I'm doing it off camera, but you just sort of hold the pocket out and then push the knife into your pocket with your other hand. That's fine. It's not a big deal. What kind of bothers me is that they, for whatever reason, prioritize this final screw over the pocket clip. The position of the pocket clip has it carrying a little bit shallow. It's not excessively shallow, and there's still a lot of knife in your pocket. But truthfully, about that much is going to stick out of your pocket. It's pretty similar to a hinderer. I don't think that it's really that big of a deal, but we could have moved, the pocket clip could have sat much higher if this screw were just somewhere else. I mean, they can't move it up here because obviously they wanted the tip of the blade to come here without having the backspacer like wrap up and around the knife. And I suppose it could have been moved back, but then it's where they wanted to put the lanyard. I don't know. I understand the design is what it is to get the aesthetics that they were going for. Maybe they felt like that's where it had to be, considering the design of the pocket clip. And it is a great design and it looks nice. And here's the thing, it functions. The only slightly frustrating issue here is that it carries about 1/4 of an inch more shallow than I would prefer, but it's not a deal breaker. It's just like the issue with it's got 2 extra screws on it than I want to see, right? I like to see a clip that carries fairly deep, and I like to see a maximum of 4 screws on the knife. Are those deal breakers? No, they're just here you go. Here's the information. If it bothers you, it bothers you. If it doesn't, it doesn't, Moving on here, we do have and by the way, this is a titanium clip. We do have a steel lock bar insert doubling as the over travel stop. So it works just fine. The blade is absolutely 100% perfectly centered, which is what I expect from Reate, and it is 100% solid in the lockup. This also has internal stops, but they function the same way as external stops, meaning that they brace on the frame, which I think is excellent in a knife that's actually meant to be used hard, because when you're using this knife and you're cutting in and you're doing that thing where the blade gets stuck and you kind of have to wiggle it around to get it back out, or if you're doing things that the knife is not designed to do, the nice thing about those stops is that they mitigate pressure away from the pivot. So is it as strong as a fixed blade? No, but it's, in my opinion, it's better or more durable, heavy quotes, more durable design than one where the tang of the blade just sort of curves around a stop pin, right? That pressure left and right is mitigated away from the pivot, which is crucial to the overall integrity of the knife, right? How much more durable is it? I don't know, but I think I like that, right? This area up here is fairly open. So one could argue that excess debris could get in there and really cause the bearings to gunk up. I always reference my buddy Rob ZT0562 that has never been cleaned. I started working with Rob at the dealership, gosh, it would have been 5 years ago, and probably 6 months after I met him, he bought that 0562, and to this day, still has it and still does not clean it. I check on it every now and then. It's fine. The only thing that's really going to slow your knife down, right, if it's running on bearings, is if you are caking dirt in there or sand or something like that. If you're just using the knife and every now and then some pocket lint gets in there or some regular, it's not going to slow it down. And bearings don't need excess lubrication, right? For the most part, bearings do a good job of kind of kicking stuff back out. Now, obviously, everybody's, environment, their work environment is a little bit different. What they use their knives for is a little bit different. But this area being open will not affect, or more open than you would normally expect on a titanium frame lock running on bearings, is going to affect maybe 1% of people, in a way that it causes the knife to not function properly. For the vast majority of us, that will never be a problem. And guess what? If it is a problem, here's what you do to fix it. You blow it out with compressed air. And if that doesn't work, you take the knife apart and you clean it out, and then you're going to be just fine. And guess what? Again, the knife is super easy to take apart. So do I think that's a big deal? No, I don't. No, I don't. Let's see here. What else? What did we not talk about on this side? Oh, people wanting to see lockup, I'm sure. This knife seems to be locking up something around 25% or so. And like I said, absolutely solid. The geometry is great. This knife is really, really good, guys. Again, little things that I can complain about. It's got 3 screws on each side versus the 2 that I normally prefer to see. I really don't care that much, right? That's just a personal quirk where I'm like, oh, it's 2 less screws I got to take out. The pocket clip is fine. You might have to use 2 hands to get it over your pocket every now and then, right? The positioning here is one that prioritizes a screw over the position of the pocket clip. It causes it to carry a little bit shallow, but it still stays firmly in your pocket, so there's no issue there. We are looking at milled out titanium on both sides, a small Timascus strip that is decorative but looks really nice and does not hinder you in terms of utility or performance of the blade. We have a blade that is set up for hard use but still comes down to a thin enough edge that it's going to be appropriate in a wide variety of different settings, so that's great. We have action that is just phenomenal. I don't think you can fail this. It's absolutely falls shut. It's absolutely centered. It's absolutely snappy. It's everything that you look for in a knife like this, right? Now, these are made in China, but Reate, for anybody who doesn't know, Reate by most is considered to be the best Chinese manufacturing company in terms of overall fit and finish and execution. Yes, even above WE knives. And that's not to say that any of these other incredible Chinese manufacturers aren't doing a good job. They definitely are. But what we're seeing here is quality that is, I mean, it's hard to kind of differentiate. You talk about the ultra high-end, Russian production knives, ultra high-end American production knives, right? And even in some cases, we've got, some custom knives that run well over $1,000. And the quality that you get in a Reate is very, very similar, in some cases better than those knives, right? Now, these are production knives, so I want to point out, because there's always somebody saying, companies that charge $800 or $1,000 are so greedy. Reate does it for $300 or whatever. Sorry, I don't know who sounds like that, but that's what it sounds like to me, because, again, it depends on where you put value. If you're just looking for all of these elements and these materials in the lowest price possible, then yeah, because this is a production knife that's made in China, right? Even though it is put together with higher end materials, it's made in an area where labor and manufacturing costs less. That doesn't mean that Reate knives are better than all knives that cost, more money, and that those companies are just greedy, right? And by the way, I won't discuss this here because I have a whole video about this in my controversy and discussion playlist. So you can go watch that and talk about it there if you want. But in that being said, though, you are getting really, really amazing quality and execution for the money here. How much does this knife cost? These knives right now on Blade HQ run about $350, and they have a little sale marker. Again, at the time of this video, check the date of the video. I think they normally run between $350 and $425. Is it worth it? Yes. This is definitely worth the money. This is an excellent knife. There are very few things to complain about here. I truthfully have enjoyed this knife so much. The aesthetic is absolutely something that sort of syncs up with me, and the action and everything, the solidity, it has all of those little things. It's got a couple of quirks, but would that stop me from buying it now? No, absolutely not. This thing is awesome. If you've been on the fence about this knife and you enjoy the aesthetics and you're just wondering, is it put together well? Is it going to make me happy for the money? Yes, it is. Absolutely. This knife will be going on 2 playlists. It'll be going on my most recommended knives playlist and my favorite knives of all time playlist, because it is. This is definitely, after handling it, it's one of my favorite knives of all time. Guys, that's going to be pretty much it for today's review. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this Metal Complex logo right here and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.